Welcome everyone. We are really glad to offer this roundtable event titled PRIA-MA and Virtual Reality: What can we learn from Spanish approaches to perpetrator programs in prison and probation? And we have a really interesting panel of speakers today. My name is Antonia Montanos. I'm responsible for membership, reporting, and events like our annual conference here at WWP, and I will co-moderate the session with my great colleague Berta Wall, who is our research and development manager. I will give a brief introduction to the session and the speakers, and then provide an overview over the next 1.5 hours that we'll spend together. So you might know that WWP's annual theme last year was the delivery of perpetrator programs within the context of prisons and probation, and it was also the topic of our annual conference in 2020. And we have wanted to revisit the theme this year, and within the framework of learning more about perpetrator work in the criminal justice context in Spain, we also wanted to pick up on 1 or 2 points that were identified as particularly challenging or innovative during the conference. So we're very lucky to have Laura Negredo among our speakers, who was also on one of the panels at the conference. She is Deputy Assistant Director General for Open Regime and Alternative Measures at the Ministry of Interior in Spain. And among other things, she will tell us a bit about the development of the National Perpetrator Program, PRIA-MA. It's an interesting program for various reasons, one of which is the fact that the program integrates a clinical and a gender perspective. Our second speaker, Marisol Lila, is the director of a Better Intervention program at the University of Valencia, and she will present her program and her work more generally, which includes a specific motivational tool that she and her colleagues have developed. And then our third speaker is Nicolás from the Unit of Specialized Rehabilitation Programs of the Department of Justice in Catalunya. He delivered a workshop during our 2020 conference and kindly agreed to give us a closer insight into his daily practice in working with perpetrators in prisons, and he will also share some information about their use of a virtual reality methodology as one aspect of their perpetrator program. Okay, so I'll give a quick overview over the session. We will first hear a short presentation by each of the speakers. Then we will have a roughly 20-minute discussion round among the speakers on a set of questions. And then finally, we will have a Q&A session in which we warmly invite you to pose any questions to the speakers and comment on content so if you have any clarification questions directly on the presentations, please write them in the chat and we will address them right after the presentations. For content-related questions that require a bit more of an elaborate answer, we will address them in the Q&A at the end of the session, just so we can ensure a good time management. Most of you will be familiar with Zoom, but if you want to pose a question, you go to the chat at the bottom of the Zoom window. And if you, for the Q&A, please use the hand raise button, which you can find within the reactions button at the bottom right of the Zoom window. And then you can simply unmute yourself to ask your questions. Muting and unmuting yourself is at the bottom, the button at the bottom left of your screen. Otherwise, please turn off your microphone throughout the session so that we don't hear any background noises. Then a final note on data protection. As indicated in the email that you've all received, we will record the session, but edit it afterwards. So no faces or names will be visible apart from those of the speakers, and the Q&A session will not be included in the recording. All right, so much for the introduction. And now we will start the session properly, and I'll hand the word over to Laura for the first presentation. Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Antonia. Thank you, Berta, for inviting me to this roundtable. So I will share my screen to start immediately with the presentation. Okay, can you see the screen properly? Yeah?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so my short presentation will be focused on the interventions for gender-based violence perpetrators from the Spanish approach. So I will cover the next point during the presentation. The main goal is to give a general overview on the different interventions that we develop with offenders who committed a gender-based violence crime, especially in the Spanish probation context. I will also refer some information about prison, but mainly my presentation will be focused on probation and alternative measures. So our interventions are conditioned by 3 relevant regulations. In 2004, the Spanish government passed a very relevant law, which has a multidisciplinary approach on the fight against gender violence. And one of the measures included in this law was the obligation of perpetrators of participating in treatment programs when they are sentenced to prison or probation. This was very relevant for our context. Of course, the Istanbul Convention that was ratified by Spain in 2014 that also refers to the need of these treatment programs. And recently, the State Pact Against Gender Violence that was passed in 2017 that considers a larger number of measures that have to be implemented in the following years. One of these measures affects directly to our probation service in the country, as it establishes that offenders who have to serve community work should undergo educational workshops instead of doing a regular community work, as I will explain later. Well, the therapeutic context is also relevant. Offenders who serve a prison sentence can participate in treatment programs, both in the open regime, the 3rd grade, as we call it, but also in the ordinary regime, the 2nd grade, regular life in prison. But it is voluntary for them. Of course, as in any other treatment program in the prison. However, offenders on probation have the obligation to participate in these programs as a requirement for the suspension of the prison sentence, when this sentence is up to 2 years. For community work, our legislation permits that the offender, instead of doing regular community work, they can serve the sentence through their participation in a program or a workshop with no additional tasks. This is very important. In this case, when the offender has more than 90 days of community work, we can refer the offender to a program. And if he has less than 90 days, we can refer the offender to a workshop. And workshops and programs are very different, as I will try to explain later. So let's focus now on the program that we are currently running in our system. Is PRIA-MA, PRIA-MA, as Antonia mentioned before. We published this program in 2015 when we realized that we needed a specific program for probation because we were having more and more sentences in our probation offices, and we only had a manual, another program that was focused on probation, but also for the prison system. So we wanted something specific for us. This is a psychoeducational program, and it was designed by a great team of professionals from the practical context, practitioners, but also from the academia. This was a very interesting work with them. I was coordinating this group of experts. The program, as I said, is aimed at probationers with a suspended sentence or for the ones who have a community work over 90 days. It can be delivered only by psychologists. This is therapy, it's psychotherapy, and it has a duration of 10 months with weekly sessions of around 2 hours per session. We delivered this program in a group format with up to 12 people. And as Antonia mentioned, it has a clinical and gender perspective. And I will try to explain this a bit further. So as I said before, the team of professionals who collaborated in the creation of PRIA-MA was diverse. Practitioners, academics, researchers, and all of them had different views on the approach that the program should have. It was really challenging for me to put all of them together in the same room and try to find the best focus for our program. So we tried to find the balance, and I think we did it. On the one hand, it was clear that the program should have a gender approach. following not only our national legislation, but also international standards. The gender approach of previous programs that we had in the past was weak because it only included a specific educational unit on women and men equality, but the gender perspective didn't apply to the rest of the unit. It was mainly focused on one of them. On the other hand, for us, it was also clear that sexist attitudes are not the only risk factor to be addressed in programs like this. We can see on the screen all the risk factors and needs that we introduced and that we addressed in the program, but always keeping the gender view in all of them. And I can provide with an example. For instance, when we are working on jealousy, we will have this clinical perspective in terms of assessing this problem in each of the participants in the program and having a cognitive behavioral approach on how to deal with this pathological jealousy. But also, we address this topic explaining to the participants that women and men are socialized in a different way because of their gender. And this affects the way that we deal with the fear of loss, the way that we deal with our own emotions, how we build our self-esteem is different. So in all these topics, if you go to the manual, you will see that there are always some remarks on how to address each of these topics from a gender point of view. And I think this has been working really well. This is the structure of the program. First, we start with an evaluation and motivational phase that was prepared by the experts from the University of Valencia, and we have their director here, Marisol, Lila. They did an amazing work. It actually has over 200 pages of the manual. So this motivational phase is really key. So in this case, we do 3 individual sessions with each of the offenders who are going to participate in the program, and also a group session within the first month of the program. Then they go to the intervention phase already in the group format, where they undergo 32 group sessions, dealing with all the different units that I mentioned on the previous screen, addressing all the risk factors, and they are working on this during 8 months. During this intervention phase, even though it's in a group format, we are also introducing follow-up individual sessions with each offender to keep working on the motivational part of the program. And after the intervention phase, we have the follow-up phase with individual sessions with each of the offenders again, as I said, 1 month after this intervention. So we did some research to see if these programs work for us. Very briefly, I can tell you that this research was conducted with over 700 offenders to see if there was a change in the main psychological variables, and we had experimental and control group. So you can see that there was an increase after the program in some of the variables we were really interested in: communication skill, assumption of offense responsibilities, satisfaction with partner relationship, and empathy. Whereas there was a decrease in jealousy, anger, hostility, impulsivity, emotional abuse, and so on. But we also wanted to know the long-term effect of treatment in terms of reducing recidivism. So after 1 year of follow-up, after 1 year of the program, we found that 4.6% of the offenders were reported to the police for a new gender-related offense. And after 5 years, this number increased to 6.8%. In this case, we cannot compare with the control group because the whole group was experimental group. We didn't have a control group to compare, but we can compare with the data given by international research, which states that offenders who don't undergo treatment reoffend with a percentage of between 21 and 35% of reoffending. So I think these numbers really show that the intervention is working well, also in reducing recidivism rates. There is a new study that was just published by one of the NGOs that is collaborating with us. In this case, the focus is on dropouts. We wanted to know how many of the offenders really finish the program, how many drop out, what's their profile, and what can we learn from this data. So you can see here that 6.6% of the offenders don't show up to the first treatment session, but for the ones that really stay, 18% don't finish the program. The study also analyzes the reasons for dropping out, and the first one is the high number of absences. So if the offender doesn't go to 2 or 3 sessions, then the therapist has to expel, has to refer the case to the probation office, and this person is reported to the judge. And they cannot continue with the program until the judge takes a decision on this. But there are also the reasons like transfer from one probation office to another one, behavioral problems, and also some of them are sent to prison. So that's also a reason for dropping out the program. We also analyzed some predictors of dropping out. Who are the offenders who are going to not finish the program with us? The ones with a number of incidents during the program, of course, but also the ones with an active use of drugs, the offenders with a higher number of partners, and the participants with shorter relationship with the victim. This is data, very recent data that we are still analyzing. And of course, we also found that there is a higher recidivism rate in offenders who drop out the programs. So the idea is to be able to detect the high risk individuals before they start the intervention, to define different paths in relation to their needs, taking into account this information. So all of this previous information was about PRIA-MA, but we also have another intervention that is the Taller Regenerate workshop. Once the PRIA-MA was a consolidated program nationwide, we needed another type of intervention for a major group of offenders on probation. And now I refer to the ones who serve a short community work sentence. In this regard, we consider that ordinary community work may have little impact on offender rehabilitation. So we decided to create a specific intervention for these offenders. The result was the Regenerate workshop that was published in 2020. It's for probationers with community work up to 90 days. It has a multidisciplinary approach, and it may be delivered by social workers, educators, psychologists, and other professionals. It lasts 40 hours with weekly sessions of 4 hours, and also in a group format with up to 15 people. It's a very practical workshop. It's practical oriented. You can see here some numbers for the program for PRIA-MA. Around 9,000 offenders participate in this program every year in Spain. Of course, in 2020, this number decreased a little bit because of the pandemic, but considering data of 2021 until October, and I think we will get to the 9,000 offenders again this year, by the end of this year. The Regenerate workshop was piloted in 2020 with over 300 offenders, but this year more than 2,000 already went through this workshop. So we are implementing the Regenerate workshop in the whole country as well. Well, who delivers these interventions for gender-based violence offenders? On the one hand, we have our own professionals, probation and prison psychologists. In the case of the program, you can see in the graphic that the 62% of the programs are run by civil servants, by our own professionals. But the 38% of the programs are run by NGOs. We have currently 34 NGOs nationwide implementing PRIA-MA. Then we have for the Regenerate is the other way around. We have 23 NGOs and they do the 83% of all the implementation of this workshop, whereas the rest of the 17% is for our probation, social workers, educators, our psychologists are the ones who are implementing this workshop. Well, interagency cooperation is very important. You see that we work with local agencies, NGOs, and our own professionals. But we need to keep in contact in order to achieve coherence and consistency in the work that we carry out with the offenders. So for us, it is really important that the procedures and the techniques do not differ, regardless of whether they are set up by an NGO or a civil servant or the public administration. For this, we use some practices. First, we sign collaboration agreements between the public administration and the NGOs. And here we include the goals of the cooperation, the role of each partner, the duration of the agreement, if there is funding, assessment commission, and all the different aspects. Second, we have the National Committee on Penalties and Alternative Measures. This is a committee of horizontal cooperation between the penitentiary administration, the probation, and the most important NGOs in the country. We meet every 3 months to ensure the development of projects, agree on objectives, stimulate good practices, solve coordination problems. And this committee is organized in small working groups to deal with specific issues that affect offenders serving an alternative measure. We have a working group for mental health, another one for good practices and challenges in the delivery of programs, another one for community work and local corporations, and so on. And the third measure that we do is that we have these local social committees that are organized in every prison or probation officers with their own local NGOs. They also meet periodically to deal with the challenges and difficulties that they face in the interventions with offenders on a daily basis. Here I just bring some numbers so you can see the state funding for interventions with perpetrators for NGOs, over 300,000 euros in 2020 and more than €500,000 in 2021. And this is only the state funding for NGOs. There are also other local fundings for these interventions. And this is my last slide because I think I'm over my time. The challenges for the future, what we are working on currently is that we want to improve the assessment process to detect high-risk offenders before we start the intervention process. And for this, we will use the data that I showed from this new study that we have. We also want to increase the number of community work cases that serve the sentence by this participation in workshops and programs. They are still very little compared to regular community work. Third, we want to increase the collaboration with local entities, local organizations to implement mixed formats. I didn't mention this, but in some cities, we have treatment programs with voluntary citizens that are interested in going to one of these programs, and mandatory clients from the probation office, and this is working really well. And we also want to evaluate the efficacy of the Regenerate workshop to see how it impacts on recidivism. But for this, we need still a wider implementation. We need more time. So that was it, very fast. Thank you so much. And I will be ready for questions after my colleagues present. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Laura, for your presentation. Let's hand it over to Marisol.
Well, I am going to share my screen. Okay, you see, all of you see the screen? Yeah, perfect.
Yes.
Well, good morning. First of all, I want to thank Work with Perpetrators European Network to invite me to join them and to give this presentation today. Well, I'm going to go fast as Laura, and we will give some bits of information of our work in the University of Valencia with a Contexto program. First of all, I want to say that we have two main principles. One of them is we work to prevent and to protect victims. Always we have this goal in mind. And also we work from the university, and we work and we try to do all our intervention evidence-based, scientific evidence-based. It's like Laura has explained, they also always are doing research to prove or to show that their intervention or our intervention is evidence-based. We have four main branches of work fields: intervention, training, research, and knowledge transfer. Regarding intervention, we have designed a program based on ecological model and works with the same variables and risk factors that Laura has tell us. We have worked with more than 1,100 participants until today, and we have run more than 80 groups. Regarding training, the intervention lasts about 10 months because we have holidays in the university and so on, and then usually is a little bit longer than the 9 months that in the rest of programs in Spain. Regarding training, our training lasts about 9 months, and it's a long training, both theoretical and practical. We have this kind of one-side mirror to work and to see sessions, group sessions and individual sessions. And we have trained more than 300 professionals in our university. Regarding research, we are very committed with research, obviously. We have published several scientific publications. We have conducted doctoral theses. We have participated in several conferences and scientific meetings, and we are very concerned working and analyzing the issues of evaluation effectiveness of both programs and strategies, tools that we are proving continuously, and studying risk factors involved in violence, recidivism, dropout, etc. Regarding knowledge transfer, we are very concerned with this issue because we receive public money, and we have to report that we do, and we have to translate our knowledge, our research to practical work. Laura has said we developed the individualized motivational plans that I will show briefly today. And we adapted this tool to Spanish programs with the PRIA-MA, and with Laura to Croatian system, and now we are adapting to Costa Rica system. We always because this program was funded at 2006, and we always have coordinated with the Spanish penitentiary system, with Laura, and so on. Well, this is very briefly the usual structure of a program. Is our program. We, as I have said, we base the structure of our program in ecological model. On the ecological model, we have this evaluation phase lasting 1 month, the intervention phase 10 months, and the follow-up lasting 18 months. It's important to say that the follow-up is voluntary. When the participants are mandated, because we work with mandated and with voluntary men. With mandated, the follow-up is voluntary because they finish their sentence at the intervention phase, when they finish the intervention phase. I don't know why. Perfect. Sorry, because this is in Spanish, but it's only to show you that regarding the evaluation that we conduct along all the process, we have several points of measurement or evaluation at the start, at the middle, and the end of the program, and then 6 times at the follow-up. And we measure several variables and risk factors. Also, because the problems with the self-reports that we have with this kind of participants, we are very we wanted to assure that the measures, the risk factors measure, were corroborated with objective information on external information and other sources of information, not only the participants. And then we have observations made by experts through at the other side of the one-side mirror. We recording several sessions to measure aspects like cohesion, group cohesion, therapeutic alliance, and so on. And also we have the evaluation of the facilitators of each participant in questions such as motivation of change, responsibility assumption, etc. Also, we have objective measures such as physical violence reported in a sentence, length of sentence, intervention dose, homework that we send to them, and if they comply with the homework, measure of implicit attitudes, and also we have access to the Biogen, the system that reflects all the cases of gender violence in Spain, and we can have the relevant information about official recidivism. I have said that I only want to share with you three tips of information. One is the individualized motivational plan that we have. This is a strategy that we have implemented, as I have said, in several spaces and programs, not only in Contexto program. And it's based on the main objective is to increase the motivation for change, the adherence to the participants to the intervention. It's based on motivational interviewing, stages of change, therapeutic alliance, and so on. And is delivered throughout all the process, all the program, not only at the beginning, all the program, it lasts all the program. It's based on four main activities. Of course, individual motivational interviews. We have 5 individual motivational interviews, 3 at the beginning, to design and plan a plan to achieve participants' important personal goals. And then we have also 1 interview at the middle of the program and 1 interview at the end of the program to follow their performance, etc., in their goals, in their personal goals. 3 group sessions to share personal goals with the other participants and provide feedback to each other. And we think that this is a very powerful strategy to achieve this motivation for change. No? Also, the goals reinforcement is a big effort for the facilitators, but they have to have in mind all the time the personal goals of each participant, and they have to follow up the participants' goals in the weekly group sessions. And they have to make the effort of linking sessions content to the participants' goals, personal goals. And also retention techniques, classical retention techniques such as telephone calls, reinforce every improvement, and so on. We conduct randomized controlled trials, the gold standard of effectiveness evaluation. We have conducted several randomized controlled trials. Is very hard and is very long to do this kind of research, and it's hard for us. But we have published until now, three randomized control trials with specifically with this tool, with individual motivational plans. We now are conducting other randomized control trial with these individual motivational plans adapted to men with substance abuse problems. But for now, we have evidence that the standard plus individual motivational plan condition is have relevant results, because participants significantly attended more program sessions, finished the intervention in a more advanced stage of change, had higher reduction in recidivism risk, and self-reported physical violence. Also, these participants in this condition show higher therapeutic alliance and protherapeutic behaviors, and also show higher empathy. Then we think that although it's very demanding, it implies a relevant effort for by facilitators. It is relevant to do that. It's important to do that. Other tip of information: we have made awareness campaigns to call the men with intimate partner violence related problems to come to our program, and we are glad to have succeeded. We have a success with this aim relatively. We have. I'm going to show you, because we have the main image, but we have also other images of the campaign with different kinds of violence and different kinds of población diana.
Target population.
Perfect. This when I see this image, I thought, oh, the washing machine. And my colleagues say me, no, the mobile. Terrible. And main explaining, I think it's really nice. Other information: the next November, we will do 15 years of existence, and we will celebrate this event in the University of Valencia, and we are very glad. We will count with Heinrich from Work with Perpetrators network, and we have made a room for Work with Perpetrators European network to present their work. Mm-hmm. And this is our web, where we are now is in Spanish, but we are translating all the web, and we will have this web in English too soon. And we have here, see the research area where you can see all the research that we are conducting and all the publications. I don't know.
Thank you very much, Marisol.
I don't know why I'm...
Yes, yeah, thank you very much. So now we will hear the intervention of Nicolás. We are gathering all your questions, so please feel free to just write your questions in the chat, and we will think if we address them just after the presentations or during the roundtable discussion. So Nicolás, yes, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, and can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to talk to you about the Catalan model for working with perpetrators. As you may know, Catalonia is a Spanish region with transferred prison competencies, and probably has some different aspects from the Spanish model. Here is the summary of what I will try to explain to you. First, we will talk about the need to work with perpetrators. Then we will talk about some theoretical basis about our intervention model. We will quickly talk about virtual reality as a new methodology that we are implementing into the rehabilitation programs. And finally, we will comment on proposals for the future. Okay, over the last few years, scientific research has generated a wide body of consolidated theological and practical knowledge. From this knowledge, they have highlighted that criminal behavior is linked to various risk and protective factors. A risk factor has been defined as any element or variable of a personal, family, or social nature that, according to the research, is associated with an increased criminal risk. Therefore, careful assessment and specific intervention on the main risk and protective factors inherent in each individual are prerequisites for fostering therapeutic change and decreasing the risk of recidivism. Current rehabilitation models are specifically aimed at reducing or eliminating risk factors that may be modifiable, known as dynamic risk factor or criminogenic needs or necessities. Through the psychological and educational intervention programs that are developed in the penitentiary field, the aim is to help perpetrators to modify their cognitive style and erroneous ways of thinking, their difficulties in identifying and managing emotions, and their inappropriate violent behaviors that they carry out in their daily lives. That is why prison intervention enhances the personal skills and abilities of inmates through training in a wide range of cognitive, emotional, and interpersonal skills, which are essential for a socially integrated life. It is clear for us that gender violence is a structural, social, and cultural phenomenon that is very difficult to eradicate. Concepts such as violent radicalization or crimes under the incel ideology coexist inside prisons with crimes of lesser intensity. And there are also reasons why we try to focus much more on the needs of the individual and not only on the criminal typology. The need for innovation and the contribution of new methodological proposals in rehabilitation, it's clear. The main theoretical basis of our model is based on the models of Andrews and Bonta's models of risk, necessity, and responsivity, and the model of successful lives or satisfactory lives. The risk, necessity, and responsiveness model proposes that a thorough initial assessment of the risk of reoffending should be made, and then we will know the objectives of the intervention and the specific criminogenic needs. Finally, we will adapt the intervention to the characteristics of the individuals. These are also other theoretical models from which we work to adapt different rehabilitation programs into the prison, but we don't have enough time to talk about all of that models. But you can see a lot of different models, as probably you know. Okay, so basically we say that our model of individual intervention tries to adapt to the individual needs of the person, to the individual necessities of the person, and to the characteristics of the sentence. We evaluate and detect the level of risk and criminogenic needs. And based on this information, we design treatment itineraries, regulating the intensity of the intervention according to the risk detected. From lower to higher intensity, we have the socio-educational programs, the psycho-educational programs, and the specific or intensive programs. We are currently trying to ensure that prisoners who have been assessed as low risk have immediate access to third-degree treatment and work on their needs in probation systems. But it's difficult. Okay. In the socio-educational programs, we have some socio-educational objectives. Aimed at these programs are aimed at offenders with lower risk and necessities, and we work on aspects such as sex and gender, prevention of drug and alcohol use, health, emotional education, and affective and sexual education. These are the socio-educational objectives aimed to offenders with lower risk. Then we have the psycho-educational programs aimed at offenders with higher risk and greater necessities. And we work on aspects such as motivation, self-esteem, prosocial habits, recognition and emotion control, and many other things, as you can see in the slide. Prevent recidivism, responsibilities and obligation, occupation of free time, new prosocial habits, etc. Okay. Finally, in higher risk and more complex cases, we advise to carry out the specific and intensive program for each type of crime. You can see here that the program about drug addictions is one that is the main problem related to criminal behavior. We have the specific general violence program when there is widespread violent behavior in different spheres of life, or in cases of serious violence such as homicides. We have the gender violence specific program, where there is a serious problem of violence against women, and the specific sexual violence program in cases of sexual crimes. Okay, but an intensive and important evaluation is required in the when the perpetrator comes into the prison. Okay, this is the recommended itinerary for gender-based violence perpetrators, and these are the necessities described in the less severe cases, together with socio-educational rehabilitation programs. This is the socio-educational intervention. The necessities, you can see here the necessities, and you can see here the correspondent activities: education in sex and gender, education in prevention of drugs and use, education for health, etc. And here you have the psycho-educational intervention. These are the necessities when we need more intensity in the intervention. And these are the psychoeducational rehabilitation programs. Belief in change, it's some motivation program. Stop and think, when we were working in wrong thinking styles and poor values. Emotional management, the new self, preparing for the life in the community. Okay. And here you can see the intensive itinerary, the complete intensive itinerary for intimate partner violence perpetrator. As we have explained, here you can see the socio-educational intervention and the psycho-educational intervention. Here you can see the specific and intensive program. And finally, we have some psycho-educational intervention for preparing for community life. Okay. Empathy is one of the main areas of interest we are currently working on, and we will see what we are doing about it later. It is important to know that this itinerary is designed together with the offender, so that he or she is also aware of his or her difficulties. Okay, programs are aimed at for all perpetrators, especially with physical and cognitive abilities, sufficiently adapted behavior, and sufficient knowledge of the language. Are not recommended for uncompensated mental disorders or severe and active consumption of substances. In these cases, special interventions will be needed before starting the rehabilitation pathway. Okay. I think it was in June 2020 when we gave a workshop on our virtual reality project in prison, also invited by your organization. But in summary, in order to improve our rehabilitation programs, we are introducing immersive virtual reality as a new tool. And we want to explore how can we integrate the virtual reality in rehabilitation programs in a systematic way, and how virtual reality can improve empathy in perpetrators. We are conducting in this moment different experiments that seem to indicate improvements in empathy in profiles of less crime intensity with only one virtual reality session. In keeping with the idea of personalizing the treatment as much as possible, we are developing other ideas with virtual reality to apply to more complex profiles, criminal profiles. Now, I don't know if we have enough time, but it probably will be interesting to see the virtual reality scene.
Yes, I think it's 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
So let's see the video and then we close.
Okay.
Bueno, me veo en un espejo, parece que tengo cuerpo de chica. Y bueno, este espejo tiene un marco dorado, la habitación es blanca, hay una mesa, un cuadro, veo una alfombra blanca, roja también.
Luego de tocar todas las esferas, estas aparecerán en otro lugar. Toca las esferas para comenzar. ¿Qué coño haces?
Bueno, nada.
¡Que te calles! ¿Te has visto la pinta que tienes? ¿Dónde vas así? Me vas a aclararte un poco, ¿no? Parece que tengas 20 años encima, además. Eso sí que te gusta, hablar por el teléfono. ¿Eh? Pues eso se va a acabar. Eso se va a acabar. ¿Ves el teléfono? ¿Lo ves? ¡A tomar por el culo el teléfono! Que es que todo esto es culpa mía. Todo esto es culpa mía. Si es que he sido muy blando contigo. He tenido mucha paciencia contigo. ¿Por qué? Porque te quiero. Porque te quiero.
Okay. In this virtual reality scene, the perpetrator is embodied in the body of the victim, and he can see this scene in virtual reality environment. The last slide is about the future proposals. We are trying to initiate a process of evaluation of all rehabilitation programs, and we want to introduce new virtual reality scenes and other technologies in rehabilitation. And for that reason, there is ongoing collaboration with academia, with the group of Dr. Mavi Sanchez Vives. And right now we are collaborating in an European project called Regeneration, virtual reality Regeneration, and you have the website. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicolás. So we have some time now for discussing some of the questions within the roundtable, but there was a specific question to Laura that I think that could be also extended maybe to other speakers, but it's a specific question that it's kind of easy to answer. So I will post it now and then we move to the roundtable discussion. So the question is from Guillermo, and Guillermo was asking if the workshop leaders in the Regeneration program are men and women. If you have the impression that gender of the professional delivering the workshop is important in this context.
Thank you, Guillermo, for your question and for the way you wrote the name of the workshop. I think you know it pretty well because I didn't put it as well as you did. No, mainly are women, the ones who are running the workshop, as you can imagine, because social workers and psychologists in prison and probation, I think that happens all around the world, are mainly women. So yeah, I think it would be nice to have both genders and to have a team of professionals with both genders, but it's usually only one professional and mainly women who are running these workshops.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Laura. And what about in the Contexto program, Marisol?
It's like Laura has told, we are mainly women, but we run the groups with 2 professionals, and sometimes there are a male and female facilitators, but mostly are 2 females facilitating the program, conducting the program. And I think that it works very well because they need a female figure of authority, and I think that is a nice thing that the women take the leadership in this kind of groups, but also men. I think that the best way maybe will be men and women, and they can learn this equal relationship from them.
Okay, thank you. So we will now move to 2 questions that we have for the roundtable, and then I am taking note of all the questions that we have in the chat, and we will also take them at the end of the discussion, because we would also like to know from all of our speakers how has the COVID-19 changed your practice, and if you think that if there has been any changes in your practice due to the pandemic, if you think that these changes are temporary or maybe some of these changes are permanent. What do you think? Has there been some changes that maybe will remain after the pandemic? And in the order that you prefer, I mean, just feel free.
Nicolás, you start.
Okay, I speak to you from the perspective of what I experienced directly at the time when COVID appeared, when I was a member of a treatment team in one of the Catalan prisons. And I think that initially the COVID outbreak had a major impact on the rehabilitation work in prison, as almost all group activities had to be suspended. Our main task became that of providing emotional support to the prisoners, due to their concern for their own health and that of their families. But a great effort was quickly made to adapt to the new situation, and work was done on the implementation of new technologies to guarantee, for example, video calls between prisoners and their families, and other measures to facilitate their day-to-day life. And I think that this is one of the changes that probably now it will be permanent. The video calls and the new technologies into the prison environment.
In the alternative measures, in Spain was a lockdown, and then obviously all the face-to-face group sessions disappear drastically, and then we have to make telephone calls all weeks, not only to participants in the groups that we were conducting in that time, but also to participants that we were follow up, because we were worried about this situation where the participants could be with the victim or with a partner, and then we call all the weeks participants. We also made a manual of crisis management, and we send them to via email or WhatsApp, etc. And well, the facilitators work much hours and in regular situation. No, it was very stressing time, but I think that we could manage this situation. I don't know if we also made some group sessions online group sessions, but when we could, we returned to face-to-face group sessions, because we think that it's difficult to work with them in group online.
Well, yeah, I will speak about, for the prison system, it was very similar in the rest of Spain as what Nicolás mentioned. For probation, as Marisol said, so we suspended all the programs from the headquarters in March 2020. We sent to the judges the information that we had to suspend all the treatment programs as well as the community work sentences. But during this period of confinement, we started to do these remote phone calls. So we talked to our practitioners, and we sent them some guidelines on how to deal with high-risk situations. It was something very new for them. So they were really happy about having these guidelines. For us, it was also new, so we had to develop them very quickly. But the idea was to select the high-risk individuals, and to not only high risk in terms of violence towards other people, but also self-high risk. Could also happen. So we try to maintain the therapeutic relationship through these phone calls to take care of risky situations, give them some techniques and strategies to prevent and cope with this confinement. And probationers were in general very grateful for this support. We also developed 4 infographics to help our practitioners on how to do these phone calls and how to interact with them. The frequency of the phone calls, it was also different depending on the risk and so on. So once we could resume the programs in June, we did this very progressively. And of course, we first started to do smaller groups. I mentioned before that groups can be up to 12 people. But of course, depending on the space, many of these groups had to be smaller. We also tried to find larger spaces for groups. And we introduced teleintervention. So teleintervention has been a very interesting issue, because many practitioners don't want to do teleintervention. They don't like online intervention, but others do, especially the NGOs. I mentioned that we have civil servants and NGOs implementing workshops and programs. And NGOs are really, in general, they prefer online intervention. So what we did is to establish some guidelines and instructions for everybody. So for workshops, they can do them entirely online if they want to, and if they find offenders who have the skills to go through these workshops online. And today, I would say that 80% of our workshops, not only for gender violence, but also for other types of crimes, are being done online. For programs, we prefer a mixed format. So the first sessions have to be face-to-face. And later, they can do between 3 and 5 sessions online, and then 1 session face-to-face. This is but most of our professionals, if they can do it entirely face-to-face, they prefer to do it like this. We are working on new guidelines now because we think teleintervention is here to stay. It's important because we can get offenders, for example, that live in very remote areas, or they have economic issues to go to the probation offices. It's very important to have online resources for them. Also, if we have a little number of offenders in one city, and we can do mixed groups online with offenders in another city. So it has a lot of positive aspects, and we are working on that. And we also want to know if the effectiveness is the same or not. So we are also working on some research about this. I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you very much for also sharing your lessons learned, and we will be interested on knowing the results on this research, which sounds pretty promising. So there was another question in the chat, which is connected to the second question that we wanted to ask here in the roundtable. Natalia was asking if you had any contact with the perpetrators' partners, and if yes, if you also have a follow-up with them as well, also with the partners of the perpetrators. And I think this question is pretty much connected to the second question that we had. So I will also pose the second question, and then you can adjust a little bit your answers. In the second question that we had, it was referred to some of the issues that raised during our annual conference in 2020 that Antonia was mentioning at the beginning and the introduction of this roundtable, in which we discuss information sharing between statutory services and community-based organizations as one of the main challenges when implementing perpetrator programs in the criminal justice context. So, for example, working in line with the GDPR, but also having all the information available to do effective intervention and also adequate risk assessment or outcome measurement. So how do you handle this kind of challenge in Spain, in the Spanish context? And as I said, I think this is pretty connected to Natalia's question. So.
Okay. I start with the answer. Mm-hmm. Okay. Sometimes I believe that the prison system itself is built with very rigid schemes and of thought and organization that isolate it from its environment, from other external services, or for example for services as important as victim care services. For example, in some cases of gender-based violence, there may be a paradox in that risk must be assessed using scales such as the SARA scale, the Post-Assault Risk Assessment, where information about the victim is needed that is not available and often has to be deduced from the court case or from other indirect and sometimes not entirely reliable sources of information. On the other hand, in the processes of release from prison and the end of sentences in complex cases, we must make a report to the prosecutor's office and the police, and sometimes these reports contain little information about the victim, their environment, etc., because there is not enough contact with the victim care services, and there is often resistance to sharing information, partly due to the data protection issues. Fortunately, However, a working group has now been set up called the PRIA-MA group, a strategic plan for adult penal execution. And in this work group, we want to incorporate, the objectives are to incorporate in an operational way the victim's perspective in the work with offenders, with probation and prison. We want to establish procedures for communication and information sharing between the different services, probation, prison, and victim support services. And we want to create a system in which the convicted person feels responsible for the consequences of the harm caused. And at the same time, the victim feels that he or she has recovered. And we are thinking now of measures such as that restorative justice and victim services be involved in the last stage of the treatment in prison offenders. We are thinking about protocols for information sharing, and we are thinking involving victim services in the development of offender programs too. But it is not an easy job, and we will probably encounter some resistance, which I hope to gradually transform into more collaborative dynamics.
Regarding the victims contact, we are not provided with data of the victims, then we can't achieve or reach to the victim. And this is a pity for the recidivism measures and so on. No? We are in contact with victims organizations, but it's really difficult to coordinate and to do work together we don't know really why, no? But yes, we need to reach victims' information to have proper measures of recidivism. But until now, we are not provided with this data. And regarding the coordination with services and so on, it has been really easy for us since the beginning, because we were working with services in Valencia, penitentiary services in Valencia, and they work really well, and with Laura in Madrid. Then for me has been really easy to work with the institution. I know that penitentiary institution is rigid, is a little bit gray, but I think that the persons that run these services are very important, and in this case, I have been very lucky with the persons that I have found there. Then the collaboration has been very easy with them. And we have to report for information about each participant. And of course, not all the information that they share in the sessions are shared with the penitentiary services, but at least they are informed that if they are in risk or we think that there are risks for the victim, we report immediately to the police or social penitentiary services. But well, I think that it's very fluid, the relationship is easy.
Thank you. Laura?
Yeah, okay. So in terms of information about the victim, no, we don't work with the victims. We don't have information from them, as Marisol and Nicolás mentioned. And if possible, if someone in the roundtable in other countries have some experiences of this, I would love to hear about them, because I've been thinking a lot about how to coordinate with the institutions that work with victims. But I think this is a very sensitive issue. And the information that we could give to these organizations, and the information that we could get from them, we need to know very well the reason and the main goal of this information. because for instance, if we want to explain to the victim the progress of the offender in the program, I'm not sure if that's going to be helpful for her. I'm not sure if we can do that in terms of data protection. So I have a lot of questions about how useful this type of coordination could be. We have the coordination more, for instance, next week I will have a meeting with people in the Ministry of Equality to speak about our programs, interventions. So we have a lot of meetings, but at the local level, we don't do that. And we are always thinking about how to do it in a good way. But we do give information in terms of in order to protect the victim through BioGen. This is the integral monitoring system in cases of gender violence that is run by the police in Spain. It's a computer application, very important, very relevant in our context. And all the institutions that deal with victims and offenders have to report in this database about potential risky situations so the police can react properly. So for instance, in the prison system in Spain, we report every time an inmate who has been sentenced for a crime of the gender-based crime, if they are released, we have to give that information in this BioGen. So the police knows that the inmate has been released, is going to be released. For probation, we just introduced a few months ago in one part of this database, our practitioners have to report any potential risky situation for the victim. If the offender during the program mentions something that the therapist consider is relevant to be reported, they have to do it immediately. Or if we can see that there is the offender has a mental health problem and is getting worse, or any other potential risky situation. So this is the way all the institutions in Spain are trying to protect the victim through this system. On the other hand, in terms of data protection with the NGOs, I mentioned in my presentation that we have collaboration agreements and we have to sign these collaboration agreements. There is a part in this about data protection, and that both parties have to comply with the current legislation on data protection. From the administration, we send to the NGOs very basic information about the offender, just the name, the identity number, the sentence, and that's pretty much it. And then all the information they collect, they know they have to protect it. They are the ones who have to do it, but they have also to report. They send us the follow-up reports, and then we send them to the judge as well. So as Marisol said, we don't have any issues on this. And I think it's also because we are working together all the time. So NGOs for us are key, are very important. We have meetings with them at the national level, at the local level all the time. We share the challenges. We speak about different, I don't know, for us, it's not that they are working for us. They are working with us in order to reach our goals. So it's mutual cooperation. But yeah, the legislation on data protection is more and more severe. And I think we are, in our protocols, we are including all these aspects in a very clear way.